have the Secretary to Cabinet who is responsible at an administrative and at a technical level for government administration. Of course, all the executive directors of the ministries, as we know it, report to him as the Cabinet Secretary. Dr. Simataa joining me here in the studio. Very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for making time out to come and join us.
Good afternoon, Ricardo.
Of course, we'd just like to share my condolences to you personally. We know, of course, that Dr. Hage was not just your boss, but a very dear friend, a mentor, somebody you've worked with for a very, very long time. So we would like to extend our condolences and really appreciate the fact that you could take time out to just come and speak to us briefly.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Of course, it's a very difficult question to ask, but I have to start with that one. When the news of His Excellency's passing came, how did that news reach you, and where were you during that time?
Of course, as you say, it's a very difficult question. I had traveled out of the country to Singapore. Fortunately, I saw him, let me backward first. On the 20th of January, he asked me to come to his house around 2 o'clock. I was with him from 2 o'clock up to 5 o'clock. We had 3 hours of discussions. And the purpose of that discussion was he had invited me to tell me about his health. And he went into details to explain to me what has been happening around his health. So I was briefed. And when there was a decision to go to the United States of America, I was one of the people that took him to the airport. And we shook hands for the last time. That was on the 25th of January, without knowing it was going to be the last time. And I took my flight to Singapore, also the next day on the 26th. When they were in the United States of America, I was in contact. They kept on telling me what is happening. When they were traveling back to Windhoek, I also knew they were traveling. I also know the difficulties that were experienced. So I was a little bit mentally prepared, but as you know, these things you don't get prepared completely. Around 6 o'clock in the morning, your morning time here in Namibia, which was about 3 in the afternoon in Singapore, I was preparing to packing my things to go to the airport because my flight was at 9 o'clock in the evening. I received a message that things are not going very well. And then I knew things may not be well. My mind was getting prepared. I then took my flight, but when I landed in Dubai, as I was going to the lounge, this information came through. It was really terrible. I was with my PA, but as it always happened, he doesn't get to go to the VIP lounge because he flies economy. I was alone, I had to go alone. But we stayed together outside the VIP lounge until later. It was terrible. I cried like an idiot, like a child. Lucky we had also other secretaries to cabinet because this meeting in Singapore was for secretary to cabinet. So I had the Zambian one, I had the Swaziland one, Eswatini one. So they were there to take care of us and to take care of me. And my colleague also, the ED of higher education, was there. But I can tell you it was not an easy thing. And worst off, we had to wait for 4 hours connected time to come to South Africa.
And that flying, imagine the dread,
exactly,
just the wait of those 4 hours.
And the flying time is about 10 hours. We come to South Africa at 11 o'clock. We have a waiting period of 4 to 5 hours because my flight was only at 4 in the afternoon. We tried to change the flights, it couldn't work. I get home at around 5 o'clock. I took shower at my house. I went back to the house to Kasarosoria. I met Madame Monica. It was very.
So by the time you're back in the country, we already have a new president.
No. Yes, we had already a new. I was watching the proceedings in the lounge in South Africa at the airport. You know.
I mean, just the balance of being able to. You left the country, and then a couple of hours later, there are all these changes.
Yes.
The wheels are moving. Of course, you suffer this great loss, but you still have to keep your hands on the pulse. I mean, how do you manage that? How do you balance that? You know, the systems must still continue, but we have to deal with this issue.
It was a difficult situation, but you know, the man we're mourning now is a great man who spoke about systems, processes, and institutions. And our constitution has been very clear on what happens in this situation. I also had discussions with many of my counterparts in the Zambian colleague and the Kenyan counterpart, in the preparation of what normally they do. And we had a lot of conversations to discuss so that I prepare and I know what's happening. So having a replacement of a president a few hours after the president have died was a very good move in my view, because people were afraid of a vacuum that could be created. Of course, you have to prepare your mental state, which is acceptable. We have the rules of law, we have the constitution, and I think it went very well.
Let's take a step back quickly. In terms of the first, how you had met first, what was the first time you had encountered, when was the first time and under which conditions did you encounter the man Hage?
You know, President Geingob, I listened to all the people who speak at the memorial services. They all are on one common thing. He had a good eye for young people, and he knew how to scout for talent. As you might know, I was the deputy director of elections in 1994. Yeah. And I ran the elections, the national and the presidential election. And Professor Totemeyer, unfortunately, who also passed on quite recently, may his soul rest in peace, had offered me an opportunity to be a visible man. I ran those elections literally myself.
When you were the deputy director?
When I was the deputy director. Although the law requires that the director should be in charge, he made me to be in charge, only towards the announcements of the presidents. But the National Assembly elections, I was announcing as they come from the constituencies. And I'm told that that's when the president noticed me. I didn't know that. So that was in 1994. In 1995, early January after Christmas, I see my friend Jeff Mbako coming to my office at the elections office. And he says, Prime Minister, I would like to see you. And I was surprised. I said, why would Prime Minister see me? You know, I have never been in exile. I don't know this man. And for someone to come and say the Prime Minister would like to see you, it was a surprise for me. But he didn't say we must go immediately. He said, I'll come back for you when the right time is, when he has told me the time. It took 2 days. Then he comes back and says, yeah, he says he's ready to see you today. Let's go. We jump in Mbako's car. He said, I must leave mine, and we drive. My office was there next to where Ferreira is now. Yeah. That's where the election office was. And it was quite in the car. I thought Mbako, knowing me, would start talking about why I'm being called. I didn't know why I'm called.
So you get in the car and you're heading now to PM?
Yes.
But and you're not aware what's going on here?
And I don't know this man.
Yeah.
So we get to the office, I sit there for a few minutes, then later I'm being invited by, he had a very good secretary called Monica Angula. And she also passed on, may her soul rest in peace. I get into the office, he asked me to confirm my names. George Simataa, are you George Simataa? Are you the guy who I saw on TV during the elections? I said yes. Then he starts talking about the elections of the 1994 December. How good they were, how we as an election team ran them properly. He took maybe 10, 15 minutes talking about elections only. He knew already that I was in exile. There was no reason of him to talk about exile to me. But he just asked whether I had a family that went into exile. Fortunately, my brother, Lifuna Machinga, who came and joined the army also, he was an assistant director in the military. Unfortunately, he died too. Was also his student. When I mentioned the name, then he said, oh, I know him. He was one of my students, very bright student. So later he says, yeah, look, I have a job for you. I followed your job. You have been doing a good job. And I want you to come into my private office to be a senior special assistant. I had no clue what that job entails. Then he goes on to explain what the job is and what I should be doing. Actually, in summary, he was saying you should be my memory, the external memory, to remind me of things and to do things for me. I said, yes, it's okay, I'll do it.
You meet him like that, and I know Dr. Mate also mentioned how he was called, just a journalist. He says, listen, Ricardo, I didn't know anything about communications, and I'm being brought in to be an assistant and to be a spokesperson when that time came for him. In your experience now, you got this position, you joined in. What was the leadership style like when he was Prime Minister? Because, of course, we all grow. So when you're president, it's a bit different from when you are younger, more energetic, and have different views. How was his leadership style like during the Prime Ministership?
He was a good leader, in my view, a very strict one. He don't make a mistake. First, I would talk about how he taught me how to write good statements, good English. Being a teacher himself before he went into exile, he was also literally teaching us in the offices. When you bring a paper to President Geingob, that time Prime Minister Geingob, he would look at it and look at the grammar. He would tell you, don't use a pronoun in a place of, these type of things. Connecting words. Minute things, but which are important when I get to think about it now. I remember taking my first paper. In fact, before he gave me the job, he said, I want to test your writing skills. Then he told me that, look, we are being attacked by UNITA bandits on the area of Katima Mlilo, between Rundu and Katima. You know that in 1994 there was that fight. I want to go and address the people in Kavango. You must prepare a statement for me. Of course, I was coming from a university, being a third-year student of political science. My professor, Dr. Meyer, was my teacher. I had contemporary knowledge of politics, and it was easy for me to put together a paper. And when I took down the paper to him, and after 20, 30 minutes, he called that I should come back. There were 3 red lines there. That shows I have made mistakes on 3 times on a 1.5 page paper, which I did in 45 minutes. He said, you have potential to write, because normally many people, they would have many red things on my paper. So I will take you, because I still can train you. So the training began immediately. So what meant was you would go in and out, discuss the issues. The good thing is he understood how a paper should be structured. He will then tell you that you should put the context before you raise your arguments, before you come to conclusion. It was literally a school. For 6 to 7 months, I was in that type of school.
Some say that, especially during that time, he was still the jovial, person that we knew, very happy, etc. But when it came to the work, he was very serious. And if you make a misstep, you will get one of those famous tongue lashings.
Oh, yes.
You'll be corrected.
I had made many of those. The good thing is he'll shout at you now, but he'll praise you when you bring a good thing. And that balance. And you don't find many of those leaders. Many leaders will shout at you, and he will never give you credit for what you have done right. Geingob was a different man. When things are not right, he tells you this is not right, no matter who you are. And when things are right, he gives you the respect that needs to be, you deserve. He will praise you. So yes, there were no cheap moments with him. He's a tough leader, very, very serious man who takes his work seriously. And I sit down and think that that man trained me, and I am what I am because of him. Yeah.
Well, of course, you mentioned the late Dr. Man, and I really want to save the administration conversation for another platform where we can really go into detail. Prof. Dr. Maya, of course, you mentioned him a little bit earlier on. His memorial is ongoing right now as we speak. And it's, I don't know, these things are happening. It's like the ancestors have made some sort of an arrangement, because now the president's passing and it's in a week where we're having all the significant days, opening of parliament, legal year, today Constitution Day, and now Prof. Dr. Maya, of course, it's elections year this year. Yeah. Looking at his contribution to national development, reflect on that a little bit.
No, Prof. Dr. Maya is an important man in our history. He taught me political science, course 1, course 2, and course 3. When I was working in Oshakati in 1993, he picks up a phone and he says, look, I am now the new director of elections here. And I scouted around for my students, and I think you are a good team that can, you're a good person that I think you should come and join me. So he forced my movement from the Ministry of Local Government to the Directorate of Elections, which was in the office of the Prime Minister. I came to the office of the Prime Minister to be Deputy Director of Elections in 1994, under the supervision of Professor Totmea, a very good man who knew what political science is. We did work together. We produced manual. You remember that was the only first elections that we were doing on our own. We did not know, we do not have any manuals.
So these were poignant actually. You had to design, set up the manuals, and then run the process according to the manuals that you drafted.
We had to do voter education processes, because people were asking, why should we now go and vote again when we have already voted in 1989? So the process of voter education, the process of knowing why people should vote. In fact, what he did, which I still admire up to now, was to throw me into the deep end as soon as I came. I came in January to his office, 1994, and I think in April, already President Sam Nujoma that time declared that we should have elections for Walvis Bay, into the integration of Walvis Bay into Namibia. He said, you should be the one in charge of those elections. and my name was gazetted to be the election chief electoral officer for Walvis Bay election. I ran that election, very tough election. You know what I mean in terms of registration of voters. There was a problem of us not getting that through because of the situation that prevailed at that time between black and white. Walvis Bay had more people that came from South Africa than our local people here. Our own people did not have many documents. We had to do sworn statements. But we pulled it through, and that's the experience that Dr. Mayor had given me in the first year of joining the Director of Elections.
I think in terms of the legacy, the President will definitely still get to that. We'll unpack Prof. Dr. Maya a little bit later on, but I really just wanted to take the opportunity to provide you with a platform. How do we remember, I think particularly with regards to legacy, the President? Because particularly for somebody like you that has worked so closely with him for so long, how do we sum up his legacy? How do we honor him going forward?
I think we will remember President as a man, in my view, who is a very honest man, a very transparent man, and a hard-working person. And if this country has to continue, he has put already systems in place that we should continue doing. Look at the things that he has put in place, the green hydrogens, the oil things. These are things where you get long-term dividends. They are not for today. But those that will still be alive 10 to 15 years from now, they'll look back and remember that that man was great. He had a very visionary foresight on what he should do for the country. If I have to come back quickly to say, he took over his administration when the economy was very bad. But he tried to do what he could have done during very difficult times. And we are going to see many of his fruits in the near future.
Finally, just a message to your administration, for lack of a better word, as the Secretary to Cabinet, responsibility for the executive directors that are penultimately responsible for the civil service of this country. What is your message to the civil servants of this country?
I'm saying to the civil servants, and I kept on saying this even when he was still alive, this is our country. We are the engine room of the economic development of our country. Civil servants, particularly EDs, are very important to transform the economy of this country through policy implementation, through making sure things are done that has been already approved by government, by policy makers. So we need to work hard to make sure that we implement the policies of government. Our people out there need us. Ministers and cabinet ministers make policy decisions, but implementation is with us. When we go out there and we are being blamed, we allow ministers to be blamed. It's us, public servants, civil servants, that needs to be blamed because we actually did not do what we're supposed to do. That's the talk we engage in every time.
Doctor, thank you so much for making time out to join us. I'm sure we'll be having more conversations with you as we lay this great statement to rest.
Thank you very much, Ricardo.
Dr. George Simataa, the Secretary of the Cabinet, of course, reflecting on his relationship with our late President, and just talking to us about the contributions also made by the late Professor Gerard Totemaier. Of course,